Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is all about making sexual health and wellness advertising claims. So as the kind of was included in the description of this webinar, I think sexual health and wellness has become something that used to be a bit of a taboo subject, and now has become much more mainstream as part of the overall kind of wellness industry. And as such, there's so many more products that are really joining the kind of cosmetics industry, and other general product industries that are really focused on making these kinds of advertising claims. And as with any kind of product category, it's really important to make sure that we're making adverts compliantly. And also that we are communicating the right things to our audience, and making sure we have some evidence to give them some really great facts about what the products are able to do. So this webinar is being recorded, and I'll be sending out the recording after the end of the session. There's also going to be the chance for Q&A towards the end. So if you've got any questions as we go through the webinar, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box or use the chat box, and we'll have a few minutes to look at those towards the end of the session as well. So to kind of summarize what the agenda is today, we'll be looking at a small overview of the sexual wellness industry, so we can think about how this industry is growing, and how it's integrating into that general wellness sector. We'll be looking at global regulations for advertising, because as I mentioned, we need to make sure we're being compliant with our advertising claims. And then as such, we'll be looking at claim substantiation methods and also sharing some case studies for those as well. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the Regulatory Director here at Ayton Global Research. So we are, of course, a consumer research company, mainly conducting user trials for the purpose of claim substantiation. And as such, obviously, we've tested a lot of sexual health and wellness products, which is why I want to talk about it today. So we've got a huge wealth of experience in testing these kinds of products. My kind of role itself is to understand exactly what I'm delivering for you today, is all of the compliance side, the regulations, what we need to be aware of, basically to make sure the research you're conducting with us is compliant in the global territories you want to launch your product. So that is obviously my speciality. And if you've ever got a project that you want to talk about, feel very free to get in touch. So let's have a look at this overview of the sexual wellness industry then. Sorry, a little bit of a drink. So PR Newswire, I had a little look around, and they did a really good job of summarizing kind of what everyone is saying. And they've got this really good kind of imagery as well about what's happening. As you can see, the growth itself is really, really big in terms of what's actually in terms of a kind of different industries that you do see grow. Usually see like a 5% CAGR increase for a lot of really great industry, great product types in the cosmetics industry, but I thought this was a huge amount of growth that we've seen, and the amount of growth incremental from 2020 to 2025 as well that they're projecting is huge as well. So it really is a really growing sector. What I thought was interesting is they said the market is fragmented. So there's lots of different players. There's no kind of, when you look at certain things like skincare or hair care, you get your really big players, your kind of like legacy brands. But where sexual wellness has become kind of a quite a new category that's growing really, really quickly, there's some sort of stores that are, some brands maybe that are more independent, that are doing just the same amount of work and the amount of product releases as some of the really big players in the game. So for example, really familiar names they've put here, Church and Dwight, Reckitt Benckiser. These are all things that we expect to see a lot of in kind of any kind of cosmetic sector, but there's also some brands on there that aren't necessarily as well known, but also, as I said, there's just a huge increasing amount of brands that are coming on the market. I know I've seen in the news recently, I'm sure you guys have as well, people like Huda Beauty are backing sexual wellness brands that are independent, so we're going to see some more kind of growth there as well. So why is it kind of growing as well? Well, there's been huge initiatives and fundraising campaigns about really making sure that there is an awareness of sexual wellness and sexual education as well. So people are really educated about what is a healthy sexual like kind of life and lifestyle, but also making sure that they are using the right products and staying very healthy as well. So there's been lots and lots of kind of initiatives, and that's probably why we've seen so much of it in the media as well. But also the kind of use of therapeutic uses and everything like that has become more well known, especially during lockdown. Actually, I'll go on to that about a bit as well in a minute. But there's some huge opportunities there, essentially. And being able to access things online, because again, has always been this kind of stigma, which is getting brushed off now. But I think people never wanted to go into a store and purchase sexual wellness products necessarily. Whereas being able to purchase things online, you haven't got anybody looking at what you're purchasing or anything like that. So it makes it a bit easier. It does still say there is still some challenges towards the growth, and social stigma is still one. But they're talking about globally here. So whereas a lot of Western countries have really taken it on board, there are still some cultural impacts in other countries where maybe necessarily kind of having sexual health and wellness isn't necessarily something that's talked about. Maybe there's still a taboo subject. So there is still going to be some growth in certain markets. There's also legality there as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that specifically about in terms of advertising sexual health and wellness products. There is still some hurdles that we need to go through to be able to make them, to be able to make these advertising claims on all platforms. So we'll go into a bit more detail on that. But it is, as well as growing very, very quickly, there is still some challenges and hurdles we need to get through here. So the impact of COVID-19. Now, I ran this webinar last year, and I still thought that this was quite an interesting slide. Obviously, we're nearly at the other side of COVID. I mean, we'll see what happens. I think everywhere's slightly different, but it certainly still is the same kind of impact in terms of where was some of this huge growth of the market. Lockdown had a huge growth in that as well. So things like condoms and sex toys and everything like that all kind of saw a big increase in purchase because people were at home, I guess, had a bit more time on their hands to enjoy some of these products. So we did see a kind of spike across the globe of these kinds of products. The only things that we saw was kind of delays in being able to produce products, as we did with any industry. However, this is something that's we're kind of the other side of now in terms of being able to purchase these. But I found these figures really interesting as well. That the revenue of sex toys increasing in Spain, Italy, Spain, and France was 124%, 300% in Spain, and 94% in France. So yeah, huge growth there. And obviously, yeah, things might have changed and slowed down since a year ago. But again, it just shows you it's something that is growing. And again, yeah, something to kind of keep in mind with market. So we're talking about all of these amazing opportunities, but we want to make sure that we're communicating this with the consumers, and we're, like I said, making sure that we're actually saying the right things in the right way. So an advertising claim, this is obviously very straightforward. I'm sure all of you know what an advertising claim is, but I always like to include a bit of a summary so we're all on the same page at the beginning of the webinar. So an advertising claim is anything that you used to say about your product, which is in the public domain, essentially. So any way that you describe the effects or talk about the benefits, they are all advertising claims. So no matter what you're saying about it, if it's kind of a positive attribute about your product, which would make a consumer choose to use it, that is what it is. And as I said, it's anywhere in the public domain. So it might be on your packaging, could be on your social media, could be on websites, anywhere you're putting it. It all comes under the same regulations. So we need to make sure if we're saying anything positive that would make a consumer choose our product, that we're following advertising regulation. It really should make your product stand out in a crowded market. So obviously make it look better than your competition, but also, you might have sort of, I don't know, lots and lots of different lubricants on the market, for example, but why is this lubricant something that they should purchase? What makes it kind of unique to you, to your brand? But also lots of different products have lots of different needs they're trying to fulfill. So we need to make sure we're communicating that as well. And as I said, there might be lots of different competitors saying the same things. So what can we say about our product that means the consumer should purchase it instead? So it really is a competitive advantage having good advertising claims about our product, as well as being good for our consumers so they know to purchase the product. So very kind of broadly, how are adverts regulated? Now, obviously, every industry has slightly different regulations. Every country has slightly different regulations. So the way we can generalize it and really start thinking about the top level is always looking at ad self-regulation. If we can understand that, we can then break down those different kind of regulations for each industry. But where I was saying before that, you've got things like cosmetic products with sexual wellness. It could be things like lubricants, oils. These sort of things are going to come under your cosmetic bracket. Then you've got things that are general products, things like sex toys and stuff like that. And they're all going to be different, industries, essentially different categories, different sectors, but they will all be regulated by advertising standards. So this is why it's really important to talk about really broadly. So advertising standards are basically, they're done on a country by country basis. And you get self-regulatory organizations in each country that basically provide a code of conduct that you, as an advertiser, as a brand, anyone that's putting all this information out into the public domain, you need to be aware of these regulations and these code of conduct. So, for example, in the UK, you've got the Advertising Standards Authority. You'll look at their code of conduct online and make sure you're abiding it. So it's up to you. No one's going to review our adverts and audit them and make sure that you're saying the right things about your product. You're going to have to make sure that you're abiding what those rules are. So so basically what will happen then is if you don't abide by this code of conduct, it's generally dealt with on a complaints basis. So if you have got an advert to say, I don't know, that your lubricant is got 80% of people agreed that it gave them more sexual pleasure, then obviously they're going to, go off that and purchase your product. But if they didn't think it was effective, they might go to the advertising standards and say, actually, this product didn't work for me. So therefore, they'll investigate that evidence and say, okay, let's make sure this is all kind of adding up. Does it make sense? Are they saying the right things? And if you don't have that evidence, you will obviously have to remove your adverts. And in some cases and in some countries, it could be as bad as fines, or even in the USA, it could be something as bad as a lawsuit. So you need to make sure that you're abiding by these codes of conduct. And particularly when it comes to sort of sexual products, there are some really sort of specific rules about making sure that we're advertising to the right people, we're not causing offense, and we're not being kind of too explicit. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail as well. But that's why these codes of conduct exist. So that's really, quite broadly what you'll be looking at in every single country you're advertising to make sure you're abiding by the right regulations for advertising. What's really important is talking about these categories again. So where I was saying before about we've got our advertising regulations, and then you'll have specific sector or category regulations that you need to abide by for advertising. We need to be really cautious with saying the right things. And one of the biggest kind of mistakes I see people make is making medicinal claims when their product isn't a medicine. And that's the same with any kind of wellness or health sector. It's so easy to go down that route and kind of start saying things about medicinal benefits when, unless your product is registered as a medicine, you can't be saying those. You need to make sure it's either a cosmetic, perhaps even a general product, as I said, if it's something like a sex toy. So basically, to break down what those definitions are, so you're not going to make any mistakes there. A medicine is something, it was basically a substance that would treat, prevent, or diagnose a disease to restore, correct, or modify physiological functions, basically making sure that you're basically curing or treating a disease. So something we see really commonly with this, to give an example and put it into context, is people saying that products are suitable for eczema. So if you're treating eczema, that's a medical condition. Whereas if it's a cosmetic, you have to word it in a way that says it may also be suitable for those that have eczema. So you're not treating it, but you're saying the product's not going to aggravate the issue at all. So a cosmetic is a substance or preparation which is placed in contact with the human body. So epidermis, hair system, nails, lips, and external genital organs. So this is where we know that sexual health and wellness products can come under this cosmetic category as well. So basically the aim of it is to clean, perfume, change appearance, correct body odors, protect them, or keep them in good condition. So we'll go through a case study later of a cosmetic sexual wellness product, and I can talk you through some of those claims and how you would substantiate them as well. So this is some information from the ASA. So as I was saying, they're the self-regulatory organisation for the UK, but actually a really helpful resource. As with many of these kinds of regulations, a lot of countries will have very, very similar patterns. So I do see the UK kind of regulations quite strict, probably compared to a lot of countries. So they're usually kind of a good go-to as a benchmark. If you're advertising in the UK and the US and Australia and wherever, if you're abiding by the Advertising Standards Authority code of conduct, you're likely going to be abiding elsewhere, although it's always good to fact check. So what have they said specifically about cosmetics? And again, this probably does come across a lot of different product categories anyway. So you must hold appropriate and adequate scientific evidence to substantiate an efficacy claim, whether explicit or implied. So if we're saying anything about a product explicitly, like this product works, we are then, we're saying a claim about it. But if you can put imagery into your advert that suggests, I don't know, it's a product and that people are getting really intense sexual pleasure from it, that's an implied advert. So we're implying that this product's going to work to increase that pleasure. So we need to make sure we've got some appropriate evidence behind it there. You need to have robust evidence to support anything that would go beyond what a cosmetic effect would be in general. So when we say about that, it's things like a hand wash will clean your hands. That's a benefit that we expect. But anything that goes beyond that, so it could be it softens the hands, it cares for the hands, it nourishes the hands, that would then be something that needs robust evidence to support it. If you've got anything that is about a cumulative effect, you need to obviously test it for that amount of time and have comparison throughout. So if you're saying that a product works over 4 weeks, but it gets better, so after first week, second week, fourth week, we need to make sure we have evidence that shows that increase. To put it really out there again, don't make a medicinal claim if you're a cosmetic. It will get you into a lot of trouble. And it's a whole process to get a medicinal product registered. So you need to make sure you're not kind of going against that at all. It's really important to note that even the name of a product might be a claim in itself. So when you go, okay, I'm not going to make so many claims about my product, I'm going to let it speak for itself, and I'm going to call it, I don't know, Silky Comfort lubricant. Well, Silky Comfort, you've already said some claims about it already. So we need to think about this and make sure we've got claims substantiation all the way throughout that process. What kind of claims are there, or what kind of criteria is there for claims, sorry? So this is from the EU Cosmetics Regulation. As I said, your product might not even be a cosmetic necessarily. It might fall under a different product category. And you might not be in the EU, you might be elsewhere. However, this common criteria for cosmetic claims, I always find really helpful. And I think it goes across the entire scope of any product in any market. In my opinion, I think it's a really helpful kind of reference point. So even if that's not your product category or your target market, this is really important to think about anyway. So just to run through what these common criteria are. First one is legal compliance. Your product has to be legally compliant, but you shouldn't be using this as a claim. So you shouldn't say that, I don't know, it has passed all dermatological tests. That shouldn't be that shouldn't be a claim about your product, because it has to do that to be able to sell it. So we need to be really cautious that we're being legally compliant, but we're not using that as our main kind of advertising standpoint. Your claims need to be truthful. So obviously that sounds very obvious, but you need to really think about what you're advertising. I've seen a lot of products, CBD, for example, as an ingredient. So people might have, CBD oil as a part of their product, but actually it needs to be very truthful about how much CBD is in that, what the effectiveness is of that product. You can't just say it and use those claims if there's not enough in the product for it actually to cause any effect that would be caused by that raw ingredient. You need to have evidential support. I will go into that in some more detail, so I won't hang up on that too much right now. You need to be honest. So again, when you're looking at that data and communicating it, you need to be honest about exactly where that data has come from. So this is obviously when we've got that evidential support, it's making sure that we're communicating what that evidence is in the most honest way possible. So not sort of saying, I don't know, 80% of women agreed with this product, but not saying how many people it was on. And then it was, it might have been a very, very small panel. So we need to make sure we're being really, really transparent and honest there. You need to be fair. And this is something that really does make a difference with competitors or comparison studies. If you're doing a comparison claim, it needs to be like for like. So it's really important to make sure we're being fair in our competition there. Basically, all of this information should mean that your consumer can make an informed decision about purchasing your product. So if you follow all the rest of those criteria, it should make it very, very easy for that consumer to make an informed decision. So we talked about evidential support. So I'm going to go into that some more detail now. And I'm going to talk in detail about consumer claim substantiation, because I think it's always obviously really important to make sure the benefits of our product are being perceived by the consumer. but I think in no more industry more than sexual wellness, because it's such a subjective thing. Sexual health and wellness, and I said I'll go through a case study of a product as well. I said it's something that really is a consumer-based thing. It's not something that can necessarily be measured. Obviously, there are things that should be measured, but I think for a lot of it's going to be opinion-based. So consumer studies are based on the consumer perception of the product and are generally in-home user studies. As you can imagine, with a lot of sexual wellness products, we want people to be able to use it in the comfort of their own homes, as they usually would. So it's really important that we're able to do that and provide that opportunity for them. And they can answer online questionnaires that are data anonymized. So again, if they do feel like there's some stigma and they're a bit worried about that kind of thing, it's all anonymized data and we can get that reported. Importantly, it's reflecting the actual conditions of the product in use. This is important not only for the efficacy of the product, but also for things like undesirable events. So if people are using a product, we've had, unfortunately, some quite interesting stories about people using sexual products and having quite undesirable events. Nothing serious, thank goodness, but lots of stinging and burning, let's say. And it was really important for our client to know that on a large scale, when 100 people having all of these reports of these irritations, they need to go and reformulate that product, because if they launched this on a market with thousands of people and had those reports, it would be a product recall. So this is what we're really looking at reporting as well. You may need some additional evidence. So obviously there are certain things that a consumer can't assess. If there's anything that's a measurement or anything to do with, let's say, the actual efficacy of a product, something like a condom, for example, you couldn't get a consumer to go, yeah, I feel 100% like that's protecting me. It's not going to be enough research behind it. So for certain claims to do with the protection or something like that, we would need to get some additional evidence. So let's look at a case study in particular. As I said, it's always easier to go through a case study and then I can put all of this into a bit more context. So I'm going to talk about a comfort intimate gel that we tested for a leading health product, a leading spine health products and supplements. So they wanted to substantiate that advertising claims independently, so with an independent testing house such as ourselves, for the target market in the EU, and they wanted to assess efficacy claims which support vaginal comfort. So in particular, this was for peri and post-menopausal women. So people that were either in the midst of their menopause or that have, finished their sort of year kind of 2 year long of the midst of the menopause. And then you have all of your symptoms that carry on post-menopause for basically the rest of your life. So it's all of the symptoms that are to do with the vaginal discomfort and vaginal dryness that can be affected by the menopause. So they're women between 45 and 70 years old. And we also needed them to be sexually active, as there are some claims they wanted to get about comfort during sex. So it's really important that we can get them to test it in that way as well. So the test conditions was to apply evenly to the area of discomfort daily or even more regularly, depending on when it actually occurs, and then to apply abundantly for the relief of dryness during intimacy. So again, we had to assess that. So it was daily vaginal application, obviously on the genitals, and we also had to make sure that we had some information for them to let us know if they do have an undesirable event. As I mentioned, this is one of those particular products that we have to be very sensitive about, because we don't want people to have irritations. And if they do, they need to stop using it immediately and let us know what those irritations are. So what were the results? Obviously, we sent out these products to these people to test in their own homes, and then we got them to answer this questionnaire to look at the claims and to look at the efficacy of the product. So on the left-hand side, we have the questions. Then we've got, this is lifted from our report. I've just selected a few questions to show you how this would be reported to be able to use as a claim. So we've got the questions there. Then we've got the number of people that were satisfied, neutral, or had a not satisfied response. And then the percentage of people that were satisfied, neutral, had a not satisfied response. So this is really important for us to be able to use. So as I said, we see with claims quite often, like a percentage of people agree with a claim. So in this case, we'd say 77% of the women agreed that the product helped to reduce dryness. 86% really liked the texture and the feel of the gel. 72% said it improved their sexual comfort, and 78% of people rated the gel really well overall. So we've got some really lovely claims that they can use in their advertising. And from our research point of view, we can see that it works in practice with people using it in their own home, and that it has relieved the sexual comfort, and that it has relieved their dryness as well. So really important. what's the kind of legislation here? So I was saying about the code of conduct and everything like that. So why was it really important for us to conduct this study in particular, and particularly in the EU? So these are really subjective claims, as I mentioned. So objective claims are more to do with your measurement, 50% reduction in wrinkles, that kind of thing. A subjective claim is to do with like the perception, the people using it in their own home. So the EU cosmetic regulation states that claims must be supported by reliable, relevant, and robust evidence. There is no difference between subjective, objective, established, or new advertising claims, and all must be supported by this evidence. And a subjective claim can be a sensory performance or aesthetic claim based on consumer perception as it expresses the consumer experience when using the product. So that's exactly what we've reflected in this test. So how do we then kind of use this information and get it into our advertising? So, so we've got that evidence behind it. Now we want to make amazing adverts. There is particular legislation and regulation we need to be aware of, particularly with sexual health and wellness products. So there is a higher scrutiny due to the nature of the products and the range of the audience that you might have out there. So the Advertising Standards Authority recommends to consider innuendo. Lots of different sort of sexual health and wellness products are going to use innuendo in their advertising, which is why I've selected this imagery on the slide. It suggests something, but it's really important that you don't take it too far and go into the realm that could be seen as offensive. Very importantly, you need to be targeting the right people. There are certain brands that have been in trouble because they haven't thought about, where their product advert is going, and they haven't targeted the exact right people. So it's really important to use. There's so much information out there about how we can target our adverts at the right consumers and everything like that. So think of exactly who your target demographic is and make sure your advert is going to be shown to them. Make sure that there's no explicit content. Obviously, there can be very explicit ads out there, probably not for sexual health and wellness products, but if we're going down the kind of sexual route, we need to make sure there's no explicit content in our adverts. You'd be surprised there are certain brands out there, even like fashion brands, that have been in trouble in the past with having very explicit content in adverts. So we need to make sure we're not going down that realm because, again, we don't want to cause offense to anyone. You need to be very, very cautious about sexualization and objectification. This is, of course, obviously we don't want to objectify anyone or insult anyone. There was a good case of an estate agent, really randomly, that had a picture of a man's crotch, and it said, "What about this package?" on the front, and it was objectifying, the man. It was completely inappropriate for what they were selling as well. So we need to be really conscious that we're not objectifying anyone and not going down that route. And of course, we need to make sure we're not representing anything that could be considered children. So anyone who looks like a child or anything that's targeted towards a child in our advertising, when you're looking at this route, it needs to be very targeted at adults, and it needs to only contain adults within your advert. Something to be really cautious of as well is social media. So there are really strict adverts. There's really strict rules for advertising on Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, Google, and Bing. And basically, you can promote products for safe sex, but you cannot promote products for enhancements of sex or sexual pleasure. This is changing, I think. And I think, again, as long as we're targeting the adverts and making sure it can't be seen by the wrong target demographic, I don't see this will change. I mean, I know that there are certain brands out there that are may breaking the mold and definitely finding ways around this. So it will change, but it's just to be really conscious of and making sure that you're aware of the rules. So instead of just putting out adverts about sexual pleasure on your social media streams and then finding you get them removed or banned, it's knowing what those rules are and making sure you kind of prepared from the first instance, so you haven't got to go through a whole process with it, really. So yeah, social media is something to be really cautious of if you're advertising sexual wellness products. But let's have a look at how people have advertised these kinds of things. So I've chose a few different products here that have got advertising claims on their websites, so we can see what kinds of things are said about these types of products as well. So there is Trojan lubricant, which says intensifies sensations during intercourse, continuous but uninterrupted pleasure, non-sticky and mess-free, unscented and clear. These are all claims that would need substantiation, and obviously a lot of those are going to be perception-based as well. We've also got from Durex, the orgasmic gel. And this one, again, is to be used for women. And it says 80% of women who use Durex Intense Gel in a test achieved an orgasm. It says and orgasm, actually, from their screenshot. That's a mistake they've made. But it's really important, again, to have that kind of statistic there so people can look at that and go, okay, well, the chances are it will work for me as well, because the majority of people have had that. And then we've also got this product from Yes, which is a lubricant again, and it says it enhances sexual pleasure, sensitivity and ease in lovemaking. It's got no smell, no taste, no stickiness. It's pH balanced, so this is a formula claim, and it rapidly relieves dryness and discomfort. So we've got all of that information there as well. So it just gives you some examples about what people are saying about their products out there, and the kind of evidence they would need behind those as well. So I'm just going to do a summary, and then we'll go to some question and answers. So if you've got any questions, feel free to start thinking about them and writing them down, and I'll be happy to answer those. So it is essential to use advertising claims to stand out in your stand out against your competition. Make sure you're not kind of going, oh wow, it's a lot of effort to get some evidence behind them, and I don't really have the budget or anything like that. Well, if other people are doing it, people will just choose their products. So it's not worth kind of thinking of it in that way. You need a well-designed study and questionnaire for valuable data. There's no point doing it if you haven't got the right kind of evidence behind your claim. You're not going to do very well with advertising it. Don't get tripped up by health or medicinal claims. You need to make sure you're using the right category regulations and making the right claims. Make sure the data is compliant in the country you're selling. And I think no more so than with sexual health and wellness products do we need to be conscious of what the advertising regulations are in those countries. So make sure you're aware of what's going on and you're using the right data. Always present your evidence clearly in advertising to avoid scrutiny. As I was saying, be very, very honest and transparent. What is the data behind it? And you're less likely to get any complaints or anything like that if you've done that. And always use recent evidence. So if you've got a study from 20 years ago and you're still using that evidence, get it updated, because things change, formulas change over time, and consumers change as well. So we need to make sure we've got the right evidence there. So I'll go to a question and answer now. If anyone's got any questions to put in. I know, Macon, you've asked if the recording is going to be available. Yes, it is. I'll be sending that out straight after this. It's recording now, and I'll send out a little follow-up email which will have the recording so you can look back as well. So has anyone got any questions to come in? Don't worry if not, because on that recording, if you've got sort of the ones in mind but don't know what to ask at the moment, or if you've got a particular project you'd like to discuss instead, I will be sending out the recording with my contact information, so you can always reach out at another time. So don't worry too much. Can't see any questions coming in, so hopefully that means that I've answered all your questions. Oh no, I've got one. Perfect. So what kind of evidence is required to substantiate claims on sustainability or organic ingredients? So these are obviously going to be going down more the route of the formulation and the ingredients themselves. So there's lots of different kinds of evidence here. Now, I would recommend a few people that you can reach out to. Oh God, I can't think off the top of my head. It's going to really annoy me. There's a company I've worked with before. I'll put it in the follow-up email, because if that's something you're looking at in particular, there are certain consultants that help with that. And when you're looking at things like sustainability and organic, it's about a whole process, about how your product is being developed, what suppliers you're using from the raw ingredients, and everything like that. There's also certain accreditations you can get. So Cosmos Organic is one of the best accreditations you can have if that's the route you want to go down to. And they'll have a whole checklist of what you need to do to make sure that you can get that accreditation. So if that's something that's really important to you, I would recommend going down the Cosmos route. But as I said, I know some consultants that work particularly with helping brands be more sustainable and organic and look at what that process is and make sure they're doing the right things. So I'll make sure to follow up with that as well. I can't see any more questions coming in. So I will, like I said, I'll follow up, and hopefully you'll be able to contact, well, you will be able to contact me if you do have any other questions at all. So to round up, so we are going to be sponsoring the IFSCC in September in London. So please do join us there. We'll be exhibiting and speaking. So you're going to hear some more presentations from us and hear a bit more about what we're doing with consumer research. So that's my last webinar for 2021, which is quite sad. But thank you so much for joining, as many as you have. If you do want any, I've got some really exciting webinars lined up already, but I'm not going to give you all of the details yet. I've got some collaborations with ZM Uni Chinese Compliance and with the Red Tree that'll all be happening at the beginning of next year. So please do make sure you're signed up to our mailing list. I'll have the link for that in the follow-up email as well. And that means you will receive all the invites for webinars in 2022. So there's my contact information, but I will be following up anyway. And thank you so much for listening today. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. And as I said, my last webinar for the year. So have a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I'll see you all in 2022. Thank you.